popular personality Ed Wynn seemed right at home in the vaudevillian Golden Horseshoe Revue.
Stagehand? Would you please take this dressing room? And my son Keenan can't understand why I won't retire.
Musicians like Teddy Buckner, Bob Crosby, and Louis Armstrong were recruited to perform for the park's annual Dixieland at Disneyland festivities.
How about doing some parading down Old Bourbon Street?
Well, okay, let us all take some. Yeah. We're gonna rock this old Mark Twain right on down to New Orleans.
The real world entered Disneyland in a big way with the arrival of New Orleans Square, an elaborate recreation of the look and feel of the Crescent City. Unlike any of the lands before it, New Orleans Square attempted to replicate a real, specific setting rather than an amalgamation of architectural traits. This forged a direct connection between Disneyland's fantasy and the outside world, chipping away at the park's exclusive autonomy. The Disney version of the colorful city even prompted public discussion of the merits of providing a similarly controlled experience for tourists in the actual New Orleans. The building of New Orleans Square signaled a shift in Disney's ambitions. Imagineer Mark Davis said of the change, "By that time, Walt knew we were not telling stories." He was right. With the opening of New Orleans Square, and even the Tiki Room before it, Disney's reliance on narrative had given way to the creation of rich environments with only a mere hint of story. The results of this were new attractions that completely immersed the viewer, removing them from the real world more effectively than anything he'd done before.
Now here you see the pirates are dunking the mayor into the well, trying to force him to reveal the hiding places of the town treasure. The audience will be seeing this from a boat, you know, and all the characters will be life-size and lifelike in their movements. These fellows have found the town's rum supplies, but they're actually more interested in what's taking place across the river. Here, their shipmates are auctioning off the town beauties, and there's the biggest bargain of all.
Yet even as he pulled away from reality with pirates and the Haunted Mansion, it was a whole different story across the park. The world outside Disneyland's gates had become increasingly dangerous and unpleasant. Race riots, Vietnam, and flower power had the country in crisis. Much as Disneyland was Walt's response to the coarseness of amusement parks, he responded to the world's new problems by rebuilding Tomorrowland. The '67 Tomorrowland, more than any version before, seemed reminiscent of the City Beautiful movement of the early 1900s. Advocates of the era believed, as Walt might have, that great aesthetics and planning could promote harmony and improve quality of life. Along with the striking new architecture, Walt's new Tomorrowland featured a heavy focus on transportation, a societal concern then as well as today. Hoping to effect change in the outside world, Disney premiered the People Mover, a system of mass transit that, along with a monorail, could help reduce pollution and traffic jams. The rebuilding of Tomorrowland showed just how concerned Walt was about the growing problems of the outside world. Having demonstrated the potential of new transit systems at the park, Walt hoped to apply these and everything else he'd learned from Disneyland to an actual city, Epcot. This would have turned the premise of Disneyland on its head. Rather than building an environment sealed off from the outside world, Epcot would be a perpetual beta test, a prototype community open to the trials and troubles of an actual city. But it wasn't to be.
When you came to work, you were going to work for Walt. You know, you just weren't going to work on you weren't going to a job. You were going to work for Walt, and I think he was in everyone's heart. And so it was horrible. It was horrible. It's like Ollie Johnson said, and most of us did. They cried all night.
Without Walt to regulate how the park adapted to the outside world, as well as the company's focus on the newly acquired property in Florida, Disneyland regressed into semi-autonomy, and coasted into the next decade directionless. Through the 70s and into the 80s, Disneyland remained fairly quiet, except for 2 new e-tickets and 1 incident of invasion by hippies. In an effort to appeal to the thrill-seeking youth of the 70s, Disneyland once again turned to roller coasters. Remembering the ways of Walt, Imagineers dressed up the new rides with significant theming to protect the fantasy. Around this time, a number of American cities, seemingly taking a cue from the Disney model, began investing heavily in pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods and mass transit. The public had become disillusioned with highways and car-centric development, much as Disney had in the 60s. The change in public sentiment brought about new projects focused on clean, intimate streetscapes, environmentally friendly transportation, and the rehabilitation of historic structures, all key aspects of the Disney ideal. Corporate politics brought new management in 1984, executives Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. The repercussions of this change shook the company to its core. In his essay, Disney After Disney, Professor John Lewis noted that, within months of their arrival at Disney, Eisner and Wells fired over 400 employees, many of whom had worked with Walt. The new executive team then dramatically increased ticket prices at the theme parks. Coinciding with the increase in prices, the new executives abandoned nearly $40 million in expansion plans for the theme parks. The family business of Disneyland was quickly discarded for more standard business practices. The new management redefined Disneyland's relationship with the outside world, operating it more like a fancy amusement park than a place isolated from reality.
We made partnerships with George Lucas, for example, when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells came into the company.
George was kind of the next generation of a Walt Disney, and we decided to bring Star Wars and Indiana Jones into the park. We hadn't made new animated movies for a while that were the kind of blockbusters that we finally got with Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and Little Mermaid and so forth. And it was kind of a creative stopgap before the Disney company itself kind of reinvented itself.
And they were searching for ways to make the company more relevant to the audience, and Star Wars was the obvious choice.
The barrier between Disneyland's utopian fantasy and reality was further broken by the explosion of blatant commercialization in the park. Stores that had offered merchandise specific to a given land were now stocked with popular, generic character items that could exist anywhere. Characters became the basis for practically all new attractions as well. And, because management wanted the lunch money of the Six Flags crowd, those new attractions had to be physically thrilling. Walt's idea of bare story and rich environments was brushed aside in favor of predictable narrative. Thrilling as the attractions of the Disney decade might be, they were yet another factor in the weakening of the park's independence from the outside world. The Imagineers were no longer creating adventures as they'd done with the Jungle Cruise or Space Mountain, but were instead recreating familiar scenes and sequences with popular characters. Because these characters were already well known for their films and cartoons outside the park, their presence took guests out of the period setting and illusion.